And so it's a warm welcome to our first ever joint webinar from RAC Magazine and H&V News Magazine, and it's on the subject of Engineered by Dyslexia. We're very excited about this subject matter. It's something that we've been talking about for a while. It's something that we feel everybody feels that we need to understand better. You'll hear today some positive experiences. You'll probably hear some negative experiences. But the golden thread through this is we need to understand what thinking differently means. And that means not just those who have the condition of dyslexia, but those who work with people with dyslexia and those who employ them. So we're hoping to learn a lot today, and we've got a packed program, and I'm thrilled that our keynote speaker is somebody who chose to go public. We use the phrase go public on having the condition in the pages of RAC. So I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Andy Ford of London South Bank University. Andy, if you'd like to kick us off.
So, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to come on here. I am really looking forward to it, apart from the normal fear about getting Zoom to work. So I'm going to do a presentation, which isn't often the way I do things like this, but a presentation I felt was appropriate today. So tell me if I've shared the screen correctly, would you? Is that visible to everybody? Good. I'm assuming the answer is yes for the moment. So this is a very personal view, and it's a positive look at dyslexia, because, as was mentioned a little while ago, I came out, if you like, as a dyslexic on the RAC magazine, and that was an interesting experience because I had only been formally analysed and defined as dyslexic after I'd sold a company and started at another one, and then it was suggested I went to be tested. So I was 58 at the time. So it's all come relatively soon. So this is my personal view. What's positive about dyslexia? Let's start with it's a bit of a long road getting from where I started at school, which is the little picture at the bottom, plugged in, trying to understand what on earth school was all about, why it was that lots of other people seemed to be able to do things that I couldn't, being told lots of things, thinking, I don't know, what, daydream up the golden road, all the way up, and blow me down. Where do I find myself now? I'm in academia. That was so unexpected, but I've enjoyed it. So here I am in academia, and I'm dyslexic. I started as an apprentice, and I suppose that was the most positive thing that's happened to me for a long time, because leaving school was definitely worthwhile. School was very, it wasn't bad. No, to be fair to my school, it wasn't bad, but trying to understand things, being told I had to do things in particular ways, that is not the way I think. But when I found myself all out in the world, the only task I had in my life was to make my life work. Now there's something I know how to do. We can problem solve. Spending a lot of time as a dyslexic and being taught, that teaches you to find ways around problems. So this lovely poem I love, we can't go round it, we can't go over it, we've just got to go through it. But actually, as dyslexics, we always find our way around it. And that serves us incredibly well in life later on, just as long as you manage to stay out of prison. So what I'm not going to talk about today is these. although they are real, and you should bear that in mind when you're talking about dyslexia. These little list of things, free. That's not what I'm here to talk about today. I want to tell you about things that really are good about being dyslexic and about learning to understand a dyslexic, because that's a task, I tell you. As one of my business partners who spoke as my best man at my wedding mentioned, sometimes he's intelligent, only sometimes is he intelligible. But we have to learn to be intelligible all the time when we're working. So what's odd about dyslexia? I think, as I say, this is very much my view, not somebody else's. We dyslexics, we tend to think about things all at the same time. Lots of multiple threads. We see everything personally, quite visually. All of the things and all the things how they link together. As my daughter, who's also dyslexic, says, we prefer the scenic route to the M25. However, because of our dyslexia problem and the training we've had at school where we were forced to think our ways around problems, God knows how many times, we get pretty good at thinking around problems and we enjoy it. We are problem solvers. I think most of the dyslexics I've ever come across are pretty good at solving problems. Unlike your normal people, which is all of you who aren't dyslexic. Pleased to meet you too. We daydream. I daydream for sure, but we've got pretty quick at daydreaming. And just as long as nobody asks us to write it down, and in my case particularly, if they put it on a form and put a little box around it and tell me to write in there, we get very good at this. And we can get to an answer which won't be the one you expect. We can get there pretty damn quickly. So that's one thing about being dyslexic. I daydream. I gaze out of the window. In fact, that's what happened a lot at school. Daydreaming. It means that what you do is you hear something interesting and then you gaze out the window and everything goes through your head. And then suddenly you realize you're being asked a question. Unfortunately, you missed all the stuff between the time you started daydreaming and the question. So you've no idea quite what the question is. But what you do know is what was making life interesting at the beginning. So you begin to answer that question, and gradually, as people give you a hard time asking you again and again, were you paying attention? What did I ask? Blah, blah, blah. You realize what they're asking and you make use of the information that you daydreamed about, and that delivers an interesting answer. It delivers an answer which is not typical. That's good. That's an advantage of being dyslexic, hard though it can be. So, lack of imagination is not an issue. Indeed, if anything, I would say too much imagination is probably the issue. We tend to be completely at ease with big ideas, and we're very happy to think our way through those big ideas. That's not the way most people are. All those others out there, they can be scared by big ideas. Dyslexics are not scared by big ideas, which is why today we are not scared of trying to solve the problem of dyslexia in engineering. I can tell you that once I left school and moved into a profession where being imaginative and having problem-solving skills and getting to solutions was a positive thing. At that moment, I realized I was in a place I could live and I could do things positively. And by the way, just because it says we're boldly going where no man has gone before, can I just make it clear that this is not a male thing, it's not a female thing, and neither is it about intelligence. It's just a different, and I would argue strongly, that it's a much more creative approach to problem solving, which is difficult for some people to understand, involves us in trying to make effort to explain where our ideas have come from, because they will have come from random places. That's what we work through, randomness. Search engines were one of the best things ever invented in my world. And it's just a creative approach to problem solving. Dyslexia is difficult, hard, it's challenging, but when people have worked their way through it and they get into the workplace and they're still going and they're supported properly, it can be a blessing to the companies they work with. They just have to find a way to work with it and not try to crush it. So just a thought about academia. Innovation is what I learnt, was what I actually enjoy. I love innovation. I love thinking a way through to a better solution that's easier than the current way through. And academia has become a surprise to me, because there I am at the beginning with this school approach being told, and there I am at university, possibly with quite a lot of that same approach being put on me, but actually at the top end of academia, blue sky thinking is what they're after. And what are dyslexics good at? They're good at blue sky thinking. The trouble is to get to that point where I am now happy, I would say. I'm happy in academia, not a thought I would have had at all ever until at the age of 60, I suddenly became a professor. I'm in academia. When I left university, I had a clear statement. That is the last exam I will ever take. I don't care what it is, what has to be done, what I don't get. I am never, ever taking another exam. Blow me, I'm in academia, sorting out how students take exams, which is weird. So just a little bit of background then about how I got to where I am. Let me just check how long we've got. Okay. I was a consulting engineer. I was incredibly pleased to become a consulting engineer. My mum and dad were so shocked when I told them I just had an interview on the telephone. I was going to London. I was going to be a consulting engineer. I bought a suit and came up here. And blow me down, the first thing I discovered was that the company I joined just didn't think about suits and had to go and put my jeans back on again. But I worked there in my 20s and it was fine. I enjoyed it, hands-on, discovering what building sites were, going around, talking to people, planning how to build buildings, do building services, talking to people on site, understanding how things happened on site, going to site meetings, getting things to happen. And then gradually, after a time of being there, 5 years or so, I became a reasonably well qualified engineer, indeed the type of engineer that many people are after, because those 5 to 10 year people, you pay them well, they get on and do a lot of stuff. But I began to be managed. Somebody was allocated to manage me, and that plus timesheets and me being told I had to do this and I needed to do that and had to do it then and do this next, and trying to understand how I was being told to do things. That was the challenge. And that's what made me decide it was time to leave and start a better company. So I left. And when I left and started my company, I looked for friends that I knew filled in the gaps of the things I was crap at. And then I started designing buildings. And then I went to this University of East Anglia, I was asked to design a building at University of East Anglia called the Elizabeth Fry Building. And it's packed with students, lots of lecture theatres, lots of work going on. And I said, you want a low energy building and you want it to be not air conditioned. And they said, no way can we cool it down. And I said, well, in that case, anything I design now, which is well insulated and put lots of people in, it'll get very hot. And they didn't want that. So this led me to decide that I was going to solve the problem and work my way through why buildings got warm and why they got cold and learn how to design them. So this building on the left here in this slide, the air conditioning is actually ventilated concrete slabs, and that's the heating, and it's super insulated. Anyway, it got this, the best building ever, 1999, launched my company well and truly. But it's because of a weird way of thinking about things that I came to that. And I built a lot of other university buildings. That's where I came across the fact that actually people in universities, they like to see fascinating things. They're interested by them and they actually enjoy dyslexics. But then my company grew. 2008, my company had got to 250. And then the bankers messed up our country. And I found myself having to sell. And I sold and joined a big company. Very nice big company. A really honest, strong, run by engineers big company. But I began to get managed. I had to do my timesheets. That's not the way I work. So there are two ways of thinking about life. And I like this slide, which my wife found. It shows you that lots of people think in the left hemisphere way. They're ordered words, cat, numbers, 6, shapes, sequences, all those mean things to them. To a dyslexic, it's a visual picture. Everything fixed together. And if it's a good picture, everything fixed together beautifully and you can see why it's beautiful. But it's not quite the same way as others. So why would you employ a dyslexic? I would say you should employ them for creativity, problem solving. They'll have a unique perspective, whatever you can get. They will guarantee a unique perspective. Entrepreneurial skills, big pictures, thinking sideways around the issues ahead of them, determination, never give up, resourcefulness. Indeed, the other place you'll find a lot of dyslexics is in architecture. And some architectural practices deliberately look for dyslexic candidates because of their three-dimensional visualization skills. And then something I looked at when I was researching in the British Dyslexia Association, NASA employed dyslexics for their ability to think outside the box. But we do struggle with being managed. And the apparent chaos is challenging for managers. But this is a warning for those managers of you out there. It's a big warning. This is me, okay? When I get to this point, you're chasing me for my timesheets. I might decide it's time to leave and start a better company. But who is dyslexic? Quite a lot of people who run very big, very successful companies and are well respected for what they do. That's because they work their way through and they're no longer afraid of saying they're dyslexic. They're proud to be dyslexic, and that's where I've got to. I am proud to be dyslexic. And just to be fair, not all managers are bad. I found some very good ones. And finally, at the university, I'm happy, but only after I've got rid of most of the other things I have to do. And I'm now down to 1 day a week when I can just concentrate on making things happen. So these are things that I think maybe would help for those managers out there. Think about these things. But the strengths is what I want to emphasize. Identify those strengths, struggle to understand them properly, reinforce them and use them. And then as a manager, you will help dyslexics. So that's it. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you find yourself pleased to be dyslexic now. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Andy. And from myself, who isn't dyslexic, thank you for an insight. I think that's a very valuable way to kick off this session, in an insight into how you think. I'm also aware I'm probably going to be stumbling quite a lot over questions today, because every time I say you folk with dyslexia or dyslexics, I know everybody will be saying we're all different. So if we can just acknowledge that I will be saying it a lot probably, but I know everybody out there is individual, and you will have individual positives and negatives. One question's come in, Andy. We've got about 2 minutes. Typically, we've tried to cram everything in today. The first one is just about the beginning of your life with dyslexia. At school times, the main difficulty was concentrating, was it? Or, you know, how did you get on in general?
Yeah, I suppose the main difficulty was concentrating. I mean, it begins quite early. The discovery that you have to sit in the corner and try and learn to read is quite a bit challenging, because everybody else has already reached that point. But I discovered my problem it's not really reading. And as you say, dyslexics are very different. My problem is more writing. I was fine about reading, apart from the fact I can't read out loud. If you try and maybe read out loud, life gets complicated. But it's it's daydreaming had been my problem. I could do better written on every report I ever had, and failing exams, that was the other snack, which was I tended to sneak through,
right.
But the 11 plus wasn't very kind.
Thank you. Now to the other end, the second question is the other end of your career. So I'm just really interested to know, once you went public, what's the reaction? What have people around you been saying?
Well, you'll see one actually. My colleague HVACR was on later, and he's I was quite surprised to discover that he was the third person who said they were dyslexic. So maybe engineering's got quite a few in there. It's been reasonably positive so far, or very positive actually. Nobody has criticised them, me particularly. But that's, you know, I am at the other end of my career. I did leave it until I basically finished, and that's not really what should happen. There are some excellent people out there who are now open, and I think it's time to be open about it, because I'm quite proud to be personally now, but that's not the situation at school, not yet. And it's certainly not the situation when you're being dealt with when you move from that first hands-on phase in your career, when you move into the bit where you're managing and being managed. That's a challenge, I think. It's difficult. Good at the sort of top end director thinking, big thinking, how to make it all go like that. Good at the hands-on learning stage, because you learn physically. You learn by getting things wrong. You do things, you get them wrong. You learn well that way. But the bit in the middle, that's the bit I think needs help.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now, there's one more thing to say, which is that people have been writing in or typing in and saying, thank you for your presentation, very refreshing. And they're saying that they too are pleased to be dyslexic. So I think the pleased to be dyslexic is a tagline we might climb on the back of. But you're going to come back at the end in traditional fashion, I hope, and help us out with the wrap up and the what can we learn, how can we move forward. But thank you very much for your time now, and we're certainly going to hear some more testimonials of people who are in engineering and have had varying challenges with managing and being managed. So I think that's something a key element is the managing and being managed, and of course spreadsheets, we'll definitely be back to those. So thanks, Andy. We're now going to hand over. So if you would like to move yourself into the ether, that's brilliant. And seamlessly, before we hand over to Jeanette Beetham to give us an overview of what employers can do and working with the condition, it behoves me to say, please use the Q&A. I see that just as we ended the Q&A, the number of questions went up. We'll try and get back to all of them in time. There will be time to talk. And as I say, there'll be Andy and other folk will be coming back at the end, so we can try and get some more in. But we will aim to answer all your questions either live or later. But use the Q&A, not the chat. Without further ado, can I hand over to Jeanette Beetham to give us what I'd like to call the professional overview. Janet.
Hello, thank you very much, and that was really insightful, Andy. Thank you for sharing your story. I really enjoyed listening to it. So without further ado, I'll now try to share my slides for you and crack on with this. So delighted to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, so unless someone sort of says something, I'll assume that you can all see that. So yes, I've been invited to speak about what is dyslexia, and as you can see, my name's Jeanette Beetham, and my company is Right Resources Limited, for a thriving and productive neurodiverse workforce. So let's see if we can move on. So quick overview of what I'd like to cover with you today at lightning speed. First of all, introduce myself, then talk about dyslexia, also neurodiversity, because this is a word that we're seeing a lot now, and I think there's a lot of confusion over it. Co-occurrence, which will become clear as we go through. Quickly just touch on education and then go and finish on with dyslexia in the workplace. So a bit about me. Yes, I've been a business counsellor, consultant and trainer for 20 plus years. Yes, I'm an oldie. And I was the training lead on the national training for workplace needs assessors for dyslexia and neurodivergent conditions for quite some time. And I was involved in developing the national professional standards for this type of work too. And in my work with the company that I set up, because I saw that there was a huge need for accurate, complete and useful awareness raising, I've developed 3 accredited training programs, and I also deliver strategy coaching for dyslexic neurodivergent individuals. I'm staff consultant at Imperial College London. I work with various universities as well as lots of organisations. I've been extremely privileged to have had the opportunity to work almost everywhere, from palaces to prisons, and I am dyslexic neurodivergent myself. So enough about me. Let's move on. So just quickly touching on this dyslexia definition, and this comes from the Rose Review, which, as you can see here, I'm just going to say it primarily affects the skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. The characteristic features of dyslexia: difficulties in phonological awareness, verbal memory, and verbal processing speed. Now, I won't read all of it, but actually this, even now, the British Dyslexia Association use this definition that comes from the Rose Review from 2006. Now, that was actually an independent review done by Sir Jim Rose into early years teaching of reading. Okay, so this definition has very much got a focus on education. And when we look at this, we think, oh, it must be all to do with reading and spelling and grammar and things like that. But actually, it's far more than that. And that's why I want to share this, this diagram with you. I think that any presentation is not complete unless you've got an iceberg diagram. So this is our dyslexia iceberg diagram. So if I'd ask you just to ignore the word dyscalculia for now, and if you look at this, you could sort of say, I'm going to use my hands, I don't know if you can see me, but the tip of the iceberg and what we can see may well be challenges with reading, writing, grammar, spelling, structuring written communications. And that might be the obvious part. And of course, the word dyslexia means difficulty with, and dys is difficulty with, and lexia relates to lexicon and vocabulary. So it kind of says what it says, those challenges with literacy. But what we don't see is what goes on under the surface and the actual processing differences that can affect someone's acquisition of literacy. And the underlying processing differences, people have these to varying degrees. And every person is unique. So, and so people tend to have challenges with orientation, difficulty with left-rightness, may struggle with going to new places for the first time. They can have challenges with time and time management. They can have slower processing speed, especially when it comes to things associated with literacy, reading, writing, structuring. Challenges with organisation. They can have challenges with phonological processing, so processing what they're hearing. Some people will have difficulty with background noise and find it difficult to filter out background noise, and the background noise dominates, so therefore they're finding it difficult to focus on what they're doing. Challenges with sequence and order. Memory challenges, but that tends to be short-term memory and working memory. Long-term memory, as long as things are in there in a way that's useful for them, not a problem at all, but it's in the day-to-day of holding that information and using it is a problem. You'll notice I've got visual processing in brackets. Now, I think there's a lot of misinformation and people have this misconception, unless they've had accurate awareness, that dyslexia is about letters and words moving on a page. Well, anyone can have challenges with letters and words moving on a page. It doesn't necessarily mean they're dyslexic, okay? However, if someone also has these combination of challenges, and I prefer the word challenges rather than difficulties, because with guidance and support, we can overcome the challenges. They'll always be there, but positive language is really useful. But if you are struggling, and then you also have the problems with visual processing, it's going to mean that you really are not comfortable with reading and you'll probably try to avoid it. And then we've got self-esteem issues, because we don't know what people have encountered either in school or previous workplaces. So low self-concept, and also stress. Being dyslexic is stressful, and stressful situations can make all of these challenges worse. Now, before I move on, what I would say is that if someone has had their early years literacy learning delivered to them in a way that is accessible to them, then it may well be that the literacy issues are not a major problem for them. So you could almost cover up the top of the iceberg, but actually the underlying processing differences are still there. And there are literate dyslexics in every workplace, okay? So that's the underlying processing associated with dyslexia. Now, in education, yes, the challenges can be to do with reading, comprehension, handwriting, spelling, possibly number, because those same underlying processing differences can affect someone's acquisition and use of arithmetic and number if, again, they've not been delivered in a way that is useful for them. And that is dyscalculia, difficulty with calculations. It can impact on people with communication, both spoken and written. They can have challenges with attention, but we'll come on to that because there may be other reasons for that. And also the problems with short-term memory, where, what, how, when, and why. If we're being told things and we're not able to hold them in our short-term memory and get them into the long-term memory in a way that's useful for them, we actually don't know what we're doing within a classroom setting. And unfortunately, even now, not all teachers will have benefited from in-depth awareness of dyslexia. So unless they've had additional training, then they probably or may not know as much as you already know from this presentation that we've done today. So if we put this into context, if not all teachers have had the benefit of this training, how on earth do we expect line managers to know about it? So we need training. And in education, certainly in early years, people could be seen as being lazy, not working hard enough, must try harder. When it comes to workplace, those underlying processing differences can affect people in timekeeping, report writing, difficulty contributing effectively in meetings, because maybe they are seen, if they've got an idea in their head and they want to share it with people, they might be seen to be socially awkward or rude if they interrupt. But if they wait to a time that might be the most appropriate for them to interject, actually they might have forgotten what it was they wanted to say, and it might be an absolute golden nugget they want to share. They can have problems with organisation, filing, email management, challenges meeting deadlines, difficulty retaining focus, problems with multi-site working, diary management, relationship difficulties. And these can be seen as performance issues, of course, but if line managers are unaware of what dyslexia actually is, they may go down formal performance management, which is completely the wrong thing to do. So what is dyslexia? It's a combination of challenges which are commonly accompanied by a variety of strengths, as picked up on by Andy: creativity, innovation, problem solving, entrepreneurial flair, big picture thinking, being practical and hands-on. And the list goes on. There is a genetic predisposition. That means that either one or both of birth parents are likely to have similar characteristics. We know it's a combination of genes, and we know that it affects between 10 and 15% of the population to varying degrees. So you can have someone who's mildly affected, moderately affected, or severely affected. And as you can see by these little pictures on the right, you know, people can be working extra hard if they don't have good self-awareness, and if they don't have appropriate strategies and haven't accessed any support when they need it, they're not actually able to optimize their strengths. So this word neurodiversity, what does it mean? I think it's being used in lots of different sort of contexts, and there is a lot of confusion. It's fairly new to our vocabulary, but it actually means everyone. Just as biodiversity means the variation of biological life on the planet, so neurodiversity means the variation in the human brain. Okay, so it's actually everybody if we look at this circle. But then there are neurodivergent conditions, if you want to call them that. There will be, you know, people get given a label, and these are some of the common ones. And we've got dyslexia in the middle because dyslexia is the one known to affect most people. Also in the workplace, it's the one that is more likely to impact on work tasks, general work tasks. We have dyspraxia here, which is more commonly referred to as developmental coordination disorder, DCD, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and that's with or without hyperactivity. So ADD we used to talk about, and that would be the dreaminess, and with the hyperactivity, obviously the extra energy. We've got developmental language disorder, where people can struggle with actually verbalizing their thoughts, and with anxiety this actually gets worse. We've got ASD-ASC, which is autism spectrum disorder or autism spectrum condition, and we've got dyscalculia. And overlap is the rule rather than the exception. In the years that I've been doing this work, if I were working with someone who's dyslexic, I haven't met a single person who doesn't have traits or characteristics of at least one other neurodivergent condition. And people, when they're struggling, will have lots of questions. Could the challenges I'm experiencing be related to neurodivergent conditions? What help is available in the workplace? Where can I access this? Who needs to know? Will this impact on my career? And people are often fearful of seeking support and reasonable adjustments, but they are entitled to it, and they should, because then they can start optimizing their potential. There's an emotional impact. If we can utilize our strengths, people often describe it as a superpower. But unfortunately, there are so many people who don't feel confident. As I said, we don't know what they've experienced before. And with low self-esteem, it can come across also as aggression, because that might be their best defense. They may use avoidance strategies for certain situations, certain tasks. They might be exhausted because they're having to put in extra time into the evening, into weekends, or the extra effort is exhausting. Self-image problems, frustration, stress, and maybe become withdrawn. And we need to consider people's well-being, and we need balance in our well-being across all areas of our lives, whether it's social, economic, physical, psychological, community, or career well-being. And being dyslexic can impact negatively in any of these areas. And if we don't have balance, it's going to not have a knock-on effect to those other areas. So seeking support is, when people need it, is really important. So with high levels of well-being, we're more able to respond to difficult circumstances, to innovate and constructively engage with the world around us. But a caution, it's commonly 18 months to 2 years, my experience, before people actually seek support. And the impact on their well-being and the longer-term impact on mental health can be quite considerable. And people are starting to, by the time they're seeking support, it's started to impact on them. And of course, there's a risk. There's a risk to their personal well-being. There's a risk they start to become disengaged. They may start to seek other employment. And because the risk of disclosure, and I don't like that word disclosure because it sounds like we're sharing something that's a secret. It shouldn't be a secret, but we understand why people are reluctant to talk about it, because they worry about their career progression. For the employer, there's a risk in terms of not providing reasonable adjustments and support, because productivity, for one thing, but also compliance, because we need to make reasonable adjustments. There is a legal duty to do that. But of course, there's the risk aspect in terms of if someone had an accident due to not receiving reasonable adjustments, and also there's a risk to reputation of the organisation if there's legal action afterwards. Now, we've gone through a period of change, and we're going through change, and change is a problem for dyslexic neurodivergent individuals because their existing coping strategies are not necessarily the best fit for the new situation. So sorry about that. So we need to consider people's psychological safety. There's fear of discrimination, fear of bullying, the impact on their future career, but there is a stigma associated with dyslexia, and we need to counter the bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And there are benefits to providing reasonable adjustments. These were some stats that came from Access to Work Department of Work and Pensions, that the maximum cost of reasonable adjustments, something like £3,000, and the benefit savings of providing reasonable adjustments is estimated around £20,000. The fact that productivity is likely to increase by about 15%, reduction in turnover of staff, and the reduced costs of recruiting someone else, and of course the benefits of retaining the knowledge capital, those people who are knowledgeable about your organisation and the jobs that they do. Now, we're talking about 1 in 8 of the population who are neurodivergent, and it's likely it can be as high as 1 in 6, depending on the research that you read about this. In the workplace, some things to consider is that literacy issues may or may not be an indicator of dyslexia. Neurodivergent or neurodiverse conditions may not be considered if someone has challenges with their work tasks, and not accessing appropriate support can impact on well-being and mental health. So 3 important considerations. There is a lack of awareness and understanding. There are fears and concerns, and that's also concerns of line managers of should I know what to do, but there are potential benefits too. Now I'm going to race through the next slides because I know I'm out of time. So dyslexia has no bearing on global ability or IQ. The multitude of processing differences underlie these neurodivergent conditions, and people are unaware of the impact on these generally and the existence of them overlapping. People may not be aware of the genetic nature or the prevalence. Individuals may not know they're dyslexic or neurodivergent. They may not know where to go to find out, and they may not realise they can access workplace-related support. And even if they do know, they may not realise that it's impacting on their day-to-day work tasks. And people delay reaching for support. So for employers, they may resist recruiting people. They may avoid it. There may be discrimination. There may be unconscious bias. And with existing staff, when it comes to performance management, dyslexia may not be considered, and they may go down that route erroneously. There may be prejudice, and there may be a tendency if people think that they understand dyslexia to actually micromanage. And for an individual, it's really uncomfortable to have that parent and child situation. So the potential benefits are, with self-knowledge and appropriate adjustments, there's increased well-being. We're able to maximise personal potential. There's increased job satisfaction, and there's improved work-life balance. The potential benefits to the employer are that in a dyslexia-friendly work environment, there's reduced absenteeism, more committed, loyal employees, and there's increased productivity, which means there's a thriving and productive neurodiverse workforce where risk is hopefully mitigated and avoided. From my perspective, my vision is that we need to ensure people feel safe to talk. We need to ensure that there are policies and processes in place so that a consistent approach is in place for supporting a neurodiverse workforce. And we need to equip line managers and HR to enable them to make appropriate decisions to maximise potential, thus being a win-win for everyone involved. So some things to reflect on. No one should struggle in silence, whether engineer, admin staff, logistics, or the employer. You shouldn't feel you're alone. There are specialist organisations that can help and guide you. It's a huge opportunity. So can organisations be inclusive if they're not also neuro-inclusive? And what would our world be like without these people having opportunity to feel their potential? Henry Ford, Albert Einstein, Agatha Christie, Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs. But just as important, what great things haven't been accomplished or discovered yet because people haven't found themselves in a supportive work environment? I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeanette. That's a whistle-stop tour, so we appreciate you having to shoehorn that into a slightly shorter time. We've got time for a couple of quick questions, so I'm going to do my trick of rolling a couple one into another. Do you think there's enough national support out there, or is it a question of directing? People need to be directed to the right places. And there's a specific question around teachers. The questioner has said that at the moment it sort of might be seen as a tick box for some people, and they might skip through. There might be an online module or something on neurodiversity, but that's it. Have you considered pushing for this to be made some more compulsory, or at least further up the priority for teacher training?
I don't know where to start, quite honestly, Andrew. Right, I've written them down, so I'm hoping I've got this. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, I've broken the rules by giving you a long question.
You've given me three. You've given me three, but I've written them down, so it's okay.
Okay, well done.
I think I think national, we're not there yet. If it comes to teachers, there was a if we start with teachers, there was a petition, government petition that was looking was campaigning for it to be a compulsory element of teacher training, and that was about 8 years ago. It got more than 50,000 and it was discussed, but it didn't move forward. So there's that. In terms of the workplace, it tends to be self-directed by employers. I mean, you hope that once there's awareness that the employers will actually take a proactive approach and realise that there are benefits across the board to the organisation to be the employer of choice, to be supportive of the people in terms of retention and things like that. But it starts with awareness. So you hope that people will take a proactive approach, but then on the other hand, of course, you've got the reactive when there's been legal cases, and there are an increasing number of legal cases where employers haven't considered this, have not put in place reasonable adjustments, or have delayed putting in place reasonable adjustments. And so, there's the pointy stick. So, there's that kind of thing. And then, of course, that goes in, that gives you the negative publicity, but of course then other people read it and think, actually we need to do something about that because we don't want to be in that position. So I think it's still quite random, but awareness is growing. I mean, I've been involved in this when I first started working in this area, dyslexia really wasn't even considered in the workplace, and that was about 14 years ago. And I've been working in this area, and in the beginning I was working in schools, colleges, universities, workplaces, but workplace is my passion because of my background, because I feel privileged to have an opportunity to have kind of one foot in the people development space, because I used to be an area manager with the Prince's Trust over all their programs, and also being a business advisor consultant, I can see both sides, but also I walk the walk as well. So for me, I'm absolutely passionate about this. I don't do it. I'm not an empire builder. I'm somebody who drives forward on this with a passion to try and make a difference. And also that's why I developed the accredited training, so that when people can say, right, I'm an accredited dyslexia champion, they can put it on their email and things like that, because then the conversation starts. And I think that's the thing. We need the conversations to start. Have I answered all three aspects of that question?
You've done very well there, yeah. I'm going to take a note to myself not to do the multi-part questions in future.
Great stuff.
You have to tell that to the audience. They keep asking them. You will be coming back to help us with the wrap up, I believe. So I will be collating a few more questions, and we will see you a bit later. But thank you very much for now.
Thank you very much. Absolute privilege. Thank you.
See you later.
Sorry, it was at breakneck speed, and thank you very much.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to say that at least 11 times this morning. We're going to move over to our first panel, where we have some luminaries of the engineering sector to talk about their experiences with dyslexia, positive, negative, and in between. Now, I'm hoping that they will pop up on my screen. There we go. 1, 2, and just waiting for Rossini to pop up. There we go. We're all in the room, the virtual room. So as we've discussed, what I'm going to do is just going to ask you to give a little introductory couple of minutes each on who you are and your experiences. I'm going to start with Rossini, if that's all right, and then we'll move to Andy and then to Paul. So Rossini, welcome. You are on mute, Rossini, so that's our first challenge. You have to click in the bottom left. There we go.
Yeah, basically, I'm a retired engineer, but I do a lot of volunteering work for International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. One of the reasons is I'm passionate about diversity, embracing challenging change for monoculture of engineering. Yeah, that is my passion for the last 40 years. So anyway, and the other thing is I'd like to make an opportunity that to introduce InWest as well. We are International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. We have every 3 years we have international conference all over the world, and I'd like to announce here we have this year in UK. So we hope a lot of companies will participate, and I also hope that this thing can be introduced within this conference as well. So it's in Warwick University, September the 1st and the 4th. That's me.
We'll one of the things I was going to mention is we should certainly put some links in at for the attendees to all these things that we're talking about, so we can do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Rossini. So over to Andrew. Who are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Andrew. It's this has been an interesting ride for the last 6 months. I think it was only 6 months ago when we had the first chat that Stephen Gill asked me to attend, and up until that point I'd never really shared with anybody, a bit like Andy at the beginning, that I suffered from dyslexia, and I say suffer because it was a suffer as a child, and as Andy said, I can empathise and agree wholeheartedly with nearly everything he said. My life was incredibly the same, you know, classed as being thick, stupid, dumb, not concentrating, not paying attention. You'll never get anywhere in life. For me, my problem, I think, was compounded. I was a 1960s child at school, and so I was taught for the first 5 years of my life a reading writing skill called ITA, which was the initial teaching alphabet, which basically taught you to read and write phonetically. So for the first 5 years of my life, from 5 till 10, that's how I was taught to read and write. And then when I went to senior school at 11, I was told, no, don't be stupid. You don't read and write like that. You read and write this way. And at that point, I just shut down and gave up. So I was cast to one side. I think for me, listening to Andy and everybody else, it's so fascinating and so interesting. And I've had a very diverse career. I've had many jobs. I've enjoyed every one of them. But like what Andy said, I enjoy the hands-on, getting stuck in, practical end of it. And I enjoy the top end of sharing those skills and dreaming and problem solving and helping everyone out. And I think I've been very fortunate, and looking at some of the other people, they've been very fortunate and very blessed to be able to build some amazing businesses and an amazing career and a life for myself, because I can empathize and I can see dyslexia in many other people. So consequently, when I work with people in my business, and I class them all as friends and colleagues, if I get the hint that they're possibly suffering, I, without saying anything, can work with them and help them and guide them and advise them, because it's just a natural nurturing way. Whether it's something that folks with dyslexia have the ability to identify others with it sooner, I don't know. You know, Andrew, more than most, because I shared with you a couple of years ago the problem I had with reading. I as much as I love to sponsor and support dinners, functions, and everything else, I find them really difficult to attend because I'm useless at remembering people's names. I'm great with faces, but I can never remember their names, and I find that highly embarrassing. The same as standing up on stage and reading an award out for someone, I find really difficult, because I'm absolutely paranoid that I'm not going to pronounce their name properly and make a fool of myself in front of everybody. But as time's gone on, and with platforms like this, I'm finding it a lot easier to be able to explain that, and I'm finding it a little bit easier that others are beginning to slowly take it on board and not see it as an excuse as to why you're not doing anything and can't get things right, but the reason behind it. I do find it very positive and very rewarding to be able to problem solve and to think ahead. Where I struggle sometimes is to relate with people that can't relate to me, because if there is an issue or a situation, I find that they sometimes think that I haven't processed all of the problems quick enough, when in actual fact I have. I'll play a situation through my mind, and I'll play it through my mind in 100 different ways. If this, then this, if that, then that, if that, then that. And so I've already gone through my mind that if somebody does something, what the potential outcomes could be. And there could be 300 or 400 different outcomes, but I can think that through very quickly. What I'm not good at is explaining that to somebody, because I haven't got 3 hours to explain to them verbally what I've just processed in a few minutes. And that then becomes frustrating for them. And then I kick myself and spend all night long laying in bed awake, thinking I could have explained myself better, or should have explained it better. So there are, in conclusion, many positives, and I'm proof of the success I've had with my business and developing the IoT platform over 20 years ago, before it was even heard of for major retailers. And therefore that's a great positive. I suppose on the negative is some folks don't necessarily understand the way we think, and therefore think that we're not, or perceive us to not be thinking or caring enough, when in actual fact we are. We overcare, we overthink, we overprocess, and it's very easily missed. But all in all, this whole opportunity, these last few months, has really helped me to be able to express myself. I wasn't formally diagnosed until I was in my late 40s, and that was only by chance, because my younger son, who's dyslexic, I took him to a specialist to be diagnosed, and we had several sessions over many months, backwards and forwards every weekend. And while she was diagnosing him, she actually diagnosed me at the same time, which was quite fascinating. So that's how I know formally. But yeah, it's been good to me.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you in a little while, but yeah, just to throw in, when we first talked about it, I remember when you were a judge at one of our awards, and the standard way of presenting is to be handed your card as you go up to read the winner. You said, I don't want to be handed the card, if you don't mind, I'd rather see it before. And it caused us to stop and think, because it wasn't what the normal process is, but it just needed one small adjustment, and then you could be happy, and then we could be happy. But again, it's thinking about, as employers and colleagues, how do we make those reasonable adjustments? And in some cases, very small adjustments that make life a lot easier to work with. Right, thanks, Andrew. And then we'll move over to Paul. Paul.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank yourself, Andrew, and Steve, and the RAC for giving me this opportunity to talk about my dyslexia. And I'd like to congratulate everybody else who took time out today. Absolutely a fantastic event. So a little pat on the back to everybody involved. And let's hope we can do some good here. My story is very similar to everybody else's. I'm 50 years age now. I was never diagnosed with dyslexia at school, and went through life, didn't quite know what was different about me. But I sort of have to pick up something like what Andrew just said there is, I say to people nowadays, I have dyslexia, I don't suffer from it. And it's a big sort of mindset for myself that it only really happened in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, where I sort of realised that there was something different about me, and this got me to where I am today. I'm a manager, the director of the commercial group now, and I actually do think differently to other people. Sometimes I have to step back a little bit and take grant that maybe not everybody in the room is up to my speed, and I actually think it's a gift rather than a hindrance. And I really solely believe that. I can tell normally within 4 or 5 minutes of meeting somebody if they're in the same sort of spectrum as me, and I can see that, and I can get along with like, total strangers I've met on buses or trains, and within minutes I can talk about it, and they go, and it's surprising how many people you actually meet, especially in this industry. I know the lady before done a fantastic presentation and said about maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 8. I think in the engineering world, that could be as high as sort of maybe even get to 50%. So, I mean, one of the things I always like to say is that I spent years and years and years in silence, not telling people. and it is the most frustrating thing in my world, and it really held me back for years and years. And I think hopefully now we're in 2021 that we can maybe get rid of this sort of stigma. And obviously schooling's different nowadays, but it's more the adults of the world that I think maybe need to step forward and admit they have these gifts. Because at work, it really does help me. It really has, right? And just hopefully we can maybe, obviously the young engineers coming through, that they don't have to suffer in silence like I did. And sometimes it can be the most mundane things. I mean, I've told Steve a story about how I hate signing in buildings. They've got to go up to the desk, write your name down, write your registration of your van down, the time, the date, something pretty mundane, isn't it? But my name, I've had it for a long time. And I said to Steve, I'd rather roll naked in fiberglass, something to have to do that in front of somebody. But and I get all anxious, but now I realise what's happening. And I just sort of breathe, I just take my time, it's not a rush. And it's just a very simple example of how you can get yourself a bit worked up. So it's quite mundane, which other people find very, very easy. So we're all different, we all have our own skills, but we could use this platform today to try and get this message out about how brilliant dyslexia and how the brilliance of dyslexia can be. So one, you come to terms with it. That's the most important thing.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm glad to hear a really positive approach, because one of the things that we really want to get across today is to embrace the positives, but also to acknowledge the negatives. And I think I think we're all glad that education has moved on, fingers crossed, from the days of Andrew's experience. But again, it's important to try and identify these things early. I wonder whether this is a sort of open question. Do you feel that you went into the engineering sector because of the way that you were thinking? Did that drive you towards engineering? I mean, I was thinking, particularly Andrew, I was thinking when you were talking about having lots of things in your mind and you're going, what if then? And then you went into that electronic sector, which of course I'm thinking back to my school days, which is the computer program, which is what if then not and all that. It's almost, was it almost inevitable to be ending up in engineering?
I think it was for me because all commerce is writing, it's reading, it's writing, whereas engineering, you're using your hands, you're using your mind to create something, and you're creating, you're building, you're working. I find it incredibly easy to look at a two-dimensional picture and visualize it three-dimensionally, internally and externally. And so I think, yes, I would say a lot of people with dyslexia, with the opportunity and those that are fortunate enough to have dyslexia, are more drifted towards careers that start off with a more practical base. More apprenticeships than universities, and there are more going into universities now. But when I know when I left school, there was more folks going into apprenticeships, and the practical apprenticeships, I think, was more where those that have dyslexia were moving into. So I agree with Paul, it's probably more like 50-50 in the engineering industry, because that's where more of us will levitate to naturally, because of the way we think and the way we like to operate.
Thank you. Rossini, what's your view? Do you feel you were destined for engineering?
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, I think my issue is much more complicated than a lot of our colleagues here, because I have the race issue, I have the colored issue, I have the class issue, and I have also kind of ethnic kind of issue. And so it's a woman as well in engineering. But myself is basically, I've been bullied in school because I was different. The school is not in here, but in Malaysia, but it's the same thing. Because you are different from other kids and you're different, you are bullied. And the main reason, you're right, the main reason why I choose kind of subjects which are not are not written or not using words or phonology or phono, is by using my skill, basically, is sciences subject and mathematics. So that's how I got into engineering, by doing, because I like doing stuff. And I can identify with everything what Andrew said, basically. And in terms of, from what I've learned through my career and everything else, the main issue is we will not be able to change in organization or anywhere. Focus on individual is basically about system. It's about embracing differences. Yeah, people are not standard, people are not the same. So if you are creative in engineering, or engineering is by being creative, you can produce a very, very, very rewarding and very, innovation. I think people might think literally, I was pushed a lot to work in a collective environment. And I was working with PopTile, which is a very creative internet company in a collective company in the 1980s. And before that, I was in a training, alternative training, which is also a collective, where we challenge creativity, we embrace everything else, all differences. It's a way of challenging big corporation, because big corporations say, oh, we cannot do it, people are hard to change. But we challenge them by saying, we have no money, but we got creative people, and we can change things within 5 years. Yeah. So a lot of this is as Andy said, is we use the positive side of ourselves to create a better environment. So I think the important thing is about embracing differences within engineering, and then we can be innovative. And that is my kind of, and I think because I'm not been diagnosed as dyslexia, but I know that I can identify everything what Juliet, I think, said before, and then neurodiversity, and I can identify with Andrew, which is saying about his background. And my path is basically passing through those challenges, because I don't like to be managed, and I don't like timesheet, and I don't like, so I choose my career or things to choose what is my strength is. But there is issue also, if your family doesn't identify them, doesn't recognize that, the issue introduce stress, introduce other factors, because you're not following, you cannot be dictated by the family or dictate this and that. So you have that. So it's ongoing issues that, yeah.
It's, I guess, it's what we should be clear to do is not to which I guess, I want to emphasize throughout this conference, is that it's not about setting a template for people with dyslexia or people with neurodiversity. It's, we need to look at the individual, and at the same time, we need to make space for, as you say, for the system. Paul, what do you, go on.
It's an interesting question. You sort of sound like, was I always heading to be in the engineering world? My mum always tells a story. When I was about 3, I decided to try and take the back of the TV off with a metal ruler, and ended up blowing up the colour TV, which at them days was obviously hugely expensive. Yeah, right. But I just always remember because there's no secret in my family, I didn't like school. I hated the old school ethos, obviously, maybe because of my issues I had. But obviously, when there were days I had metal work at school, I'd never miss them days. And it used to excite me, like, I'm going to do metal work today. But also what I sort of noticed nowadays is in schools, just touching a bit, there seems to be a massive move away in the last 10 years from actually practical subjects in schools. And I'm just wondering really if we're sort of letting down a whole generation of future engineers that don't actually get any sort of, like, even touch a lathe. When I went to my son's school, they had a nice shiny 3D printer. I know it's part of the world nowadays, but they're not getting the actual practical skills with tools, measuring. I mean, the amount of apprentices we have now that can't actually use a measuring tape or a ruler or a rule, yeah, is unbelievable. So I think maybe a little move back to some more old traditional ways of teaching of practical education is definitely needed. But yeah.
Andrew, can I add to that? Because I think apprenticeship and tacit knowledge are very, very important in engineering training. And I can say that I really hate studying at the university because it's all very academic, very wordy, yeah. And the only time I was flourishing back when I was doing my industrial training, and I was doing hands-on with medical research, and it was Heinz Wolf, who is a fantastic manager, right? Bring out the best out of me. And when I can go back to university and doing my final year at university, I was struggling. I was about to give up until I went for industrial training. So the importance of industrial training and hands-on are very, very, very important within engineering. And then that's what I would like to emphasize. Thank you.
So we've got a few more minutes. I was going to just open it out. I've just got my shoes come off, which is I'm disappearing. Right. Open it out into how have you felt that colleagues and the industry in general have handled it? I mean, are they on a sort of spectrum of being good, proactive, ignorant? What do you think, Andrew?
Handled it what since we've been talking about this subject since last year?
Well, I suppose, yeah, but I mean, I think in general, as people, do we have an industry in cooling, for instance, that really understands diversity at all? I guess. But
for me, since the first one of these we did last, what was it, October, I think it was, nobody in around me has said anything to me, not work colleagues, not anybody, and everybody knew about it, knew it was publicized and such like, but nobody has actually said anything. It's just not been mentioned at all. I think I just carry on as we're going, and it's only through these types of forums that it will become more hopefully talked about and not ashamed about. And there are benefits. I mean, I saw somebody making a comment earlier about that they even had in one of their companies, I was just reading the comment there, a psychometric test which identified if someone had dyslexia so they could rule them out. Well, I think it should be the other way around. I think if there are such a test, and then I would be the first person to jump on anybody that suffers it, because I know how positive it's been for me. I would just like to add, though, that I totally and completely 100% agree with what Paul just said. I think it's such a shame. I know now when I visit my grandchildren's schools and such like, I used to love it, going to woodwork, metalwork. Yeah, you'd have we had in our metalwork section a car that everyone would take apart and rebuild and drive around the playground when we were kids. And those were the lessons I would love to go to. I mean, I used to bunk off school for all the other lessons, but
fine.
Specifically, those sorts of things, they were brilliant, they were great. And I think it's such a shame that children aren't given that opportunity anymore. And I know I spend hours doing practical things if I can with ours, because it is so important to be able to experience a whole spectrum of life so that you know which bit you're best focused at.
There's a question that's come in that quite nicely applies to Paul, I think. It's what do you think about the manufacturers? Have they taken on board any of the issues that folks with dyslexia experience? You're proudly displaying your allegiances behind you.
Well, no, I'm actually in a training centre, so
that's all right.
Is mine. But the guys here up in Corby kindly let me one of their classrooms to do this in. With the manufacturers, I think anybody who's ever had the joys of reading a manufacturer's instruction booklet have actually realised was they actually from planet Earth, right? And some of the information is very difficult to get out of them at times, even for those who haven't got dyslexia. As for manufacturers in whole, I've had some contact with some people about it. I really think they could do a lot more, to be honest with you. I've spoken to some of the trade organisations, and they're quite keen to sort of get behind this campaign and do some articles. I spoke to GasSafe recently, and they're really keen to run an article in their monthly magazine about engineers and trying to see if we get some actual data on how many, like this is in my world, and the gas engineers, commercial engineers actually have dyslexia. But there's I mean, this is the start of a journey, and I know we've done I think it was World Dyslexic Day, didn't we? We done like a Zoom meeting on that, and on the back of that, I've run a little campaign on Twitter to get engineers to say their name and I have dyslexia, and do a little video, and we posted it. It didn't get a huge response. I think I had 9 people contact me who've done this videos we posted on social media. I had a lot of people contact me privately who said to me, yeah, Paul, I actually am dyslexic, but I don't want to talk about it on social media, which is great. But I just sort of said, one guy even said to me, like, his wife didn't know. I said, well, she probably does, mate, but like just a conversation you never had. But that day was really positive for me, actually, myself, and we had some real good positive feedback. So I think that things are changing, but we're at the beginning of a gateway on a long journey to get this. There is more stuff that can be done, definitely.
I think there's one thing that we do today is, is to try and banish once and for all the word stigma and the stigma associated.
I don't like that word.
Yeah, exactly. And it's to embrace the positives. But the key thing is that the folks around us have to embrace the issues as well. I mean, I'm thinking,
you know what it is, Andy, you know what the problem is? They're scared.
Yeah.
The non-dyslexics are scared that we're coming. Because they don't understand some of us, you see. They don't understand how we think. So that's why sometimes I've got to take a step back, especially when I'm talking to my employees when we're trying to work a problem out. Because they say, how do you know that, Paul? And I went, because I do, it makes sense. And I go, and everybody else in the room is not saying a word. And I've got to maybe take a step back and explain to them why it's not working. They go, oh yeah, and then they say to me, oh, I never thought of that. And I said, well, that just comes to me naturally. And then people don't like that, do they?
No, I mean, it's about, one of the subheadings we've been using is thinking differently. And I think everybody has got to get around the idea that not everybody thinks the same way. I wonder whether one of the minor positive things to come out of the whole COVID experience is all the discussion over wearing masks and people who can't wear masks, and then they've had the sunflower badges and this kind of thing. At least it is highlighting that for some folk, the standards the one template doesn't apply, and I think that's something we need to get over. Right, so we've literally run out of time again. So I'm going to, if you would like, I'm going to give you a 1 sentence each. I know that's hard for some of you, Paul. 1 sentence each, just to say, well, what would you like the audience to take away? So I'll start with. Shall I start with Rossini?
Oh, it's hard. I would like to change from the masculine engineering environment into more gender neutral, or not gender neutral, is basically inclusive.
Inclusive.
Yeah, everything, so it's been proved out.
So we need to think more inclusively.
Yeah,
that's good. Thank you, Rossini. So I'll go, just to mix things up, I'll go Paul next.
Well, that's very hard for me to say 1 sentence, Andrew, but anyway.
I know, it's a challenge. We've got challenges today.
It is for me, if you know me. I would like to say this is that we need to encourage young adults, school leavers, into the world of engineering. If that's into normal engineering, gas, electricity, obviously solar, there's going to be hydrogen maybe, and stuff. And so we can actually show the worth of the engineering world.
Thank you. That's good. That's 2 sentences. That's not bad, Paul. Well done.
Sorry,
Andrew.
Yeah, in conclusion, for me, it's understanding the industry. Those in the industry need to have a little bit more understanding for those of us that that have this blessing, this gift, and I think also we need to encourage more industry training organisations. There's a lot of training organisations out there now that run training courses, and when you look at the attendee list that's popping up on the screen there, there's very few folks that are running training courses and training companies that are actually sitting there today, and it makes you think, well, this would have been an ideal forum for them, and hopefully they will later on down the road pick this up, watch it on your website and review it, because I'm sure they could, with a few minor tweaks and changes, alter the way the training courses are done in the industry to help encourage more people into the industry.
Yes, thank you. It's a good point to mention that we will be sending the recording link around, and I think that's something, you know, it's something we can all point our colleagues to. So
I've had some. Sorry.
Thank you for a great day.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to give something back to you, which is that we've had people saying that today, so far today has been remarkable. So I think you know, that you should be thanked for standing up and sitting up and being counted and sharing your experiences. And we will have more. So thanks very much for your time. And then we've got to move on because we're trying to cram too much in for a change. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I just wait for everybody to disappear before I introduce our next speaker. And again, well known to some of us, Issa Shire. He's going to give us a presentation on, well, I guess what the industry can do to help. So I'll leave you to take it away, Issa, and then I'll come back to you with some questions afterwards.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Andrew. I'm really pleased and honored to be speaking to the industry again on this important topic. Can you see me, Andrew? Am I clear?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. I'm not going to put a PowerPoint presentation, but what I'd like to do is really start with a brief overview of what is my career, and then touch on what the industry and in particular academia is doing about dyslexia. I'm an engineer and currently a professor and director of research and enterprise at the School of the Built Environment and Architecture at London South Bank University. I have had the opportunity to work in both industry and academia, and I know how it feels to be dyslexic, because I am dyslexic. I have known from an early age that I learn differently. I have a different way of thinking. Although I was not able to diagnose it at the time, I came from a different country, and I came to the UK in 1985. And it was difficult. I thought this was the challenges of being in a different country. I thought this was the challenges of learning a new language. However, as time progressed, I knew that these challenges are not really just a learning challenges, and not a communication challenges. It's in a way that I think difficulties in reading and writing, I did not really think of it as a difficulty, but it took a lot of energy from me. But I always tried to my best. I found myself really putting a lot of effort into completing assignments and tasks for the school. But I thought I was doing it very well. I was getting good marks. There was also the other aspects which has been touched on by the other speakers. It's the daydreaming and processing other informations during the lecture. Looking out of the window, I notice something that has happened, or I hear the academic or the teacher saying something about engineering, and I start to analyze all of the information relating to that particular element. And then when I'm asked a question, I find myself that I wasn't paying attention to the latest information. So I make best with what I have done. I think the other element is explaining your different way of thinking and analyzing information to your family and friends. This is really, it happens when you grow up and you become a manager. It's, you know, you find yourself spending late nights, weekends, finishing and perfecting work. But the positive thing nowadays is that I see now this as an ability to think differently. I see this as an ability to innovate. I dissect problems and get immersed in problem solving in my own way, and I achieve results. I look at what I have achieved, and I always aspire to achieve more and better solutions that benefits not just me, but also the people around me. I actually found this quite easy as well after I became a lecturer at the university. And while I was teaching mathematics and I was going around the classroom giving this, I used to give students time to do peer learnings, which I believed in and I still believe in strongly. So rather than teaching everything in 1 hour, I used to give bite sizes and allow the students to do some peer learning and discuss things. I used to walk around the classroom and I find some students have mixed up in the way they're writing the fractions, the way they have copied things from the board. And I used to detect these aspects. And then I needed to find a way where I could approach that student and to let them know that, you know, they may be dyslexic. But I had to be politically correct because, as some of the colleagues and the speakers earlier have said, you know, some may not want to share this information. So that I had to search around for the best way that I could be politically correct and discuss this information with the students. So that was an important aspect. So I did discuss this with the dyslexia team at the university, and I was amazed to find out that we have probably, this is an estimate dating back 10 years, 3% of all HE students are dyslexic. That's approximately over 25,000 students in the UK. But 40% and above achieve 2.1 and distinctions in their higher educations. I also then researched into what the industry, and in particular the HE sector, are doing about it. See, the main thing is to understand dyslexia, and for the person who's dyslexic is really to understand that they are dyslexic, and it's not a disability, it's a different way of thinking, accepting it as a different way of thinking. I always put it as a creative approach to problem solving. And it's not obvious sometimes. The aspects then of this is really to take it the step further, is to get the person to understand that there is advice, there is services that are available, and support that is available. In academia, although there is more that could be done, we have come a long way in supporting special need and special learning differences, like dyslexia. The student can apply for funding through the DSA. They also can arrange an assessment, and this is really an important element. The examination can be done. We also offer blended learnings. We offer like digital recording of lectures currently now with the use of online teaching. This has become a really important aspect for the students. We offer study skills tuitions, and most importantly, the students need to have access to a material that is reader friendly, that they can look at and review in their own time and write notes on the about their the way they have learned. We also offer extra time in exams, and this is very, very important. And in some universities, they offer a special rooms for special needs students for them to be able to focus on the exam paper and the task at hand. What's important is also the time for assignments. With special need, they're always trying to improve and perfect the work they're doing. So it is really important to give that extra time. And one of the aspects with me, my time management was not that great. So although I used to start working on my assignments at an early stages, I always find I could do something better and better, and the deadline would reach and I'm still trying to improve my assignments. So students do get the extra 2 weeks on assignments. But I would say also the feedback. The feedback that's given to students is very, very important. Structured feedback is very, very important. I have learned that we should not be giving feedback to the students of just the mark. We need to communicate effective instructions on where and how to improve the work. These are elements that have really benefited from my experience. The students who I have mentored and tutored over the years, and I must say, I'm very proud as an engineer and as an academic that many of my students who have had dyslexia, have succeeded, and I'm proud of their achievements. They are colleagues in the field now. Many have obtained first-class degrees and distinctions in their academic career. I am also very proud of the ability to share with them information and experience. Their work pattern may be different. The work pattern of dyslexic, normally you would see them in the canteen trying to analyze and dissect various elements that were given in the classroom. But the important things I find is to be open about it. And once that barrier has been broken, it's important then for us to understand that they have a different way, we have a different way of thinking. I want to touch on two elements that were touched on earlier, is the element of being feeling you're being bullied because of either being dyslexic and being in having a different learning approach or a different way of thinking. It is, unfortunately, some may have experienced it, and I have experienced it. I find that the experience of this comes in not as much in academia. It comes in when you are working and where you are trying to explain to somebody else in a very executive meetings that you are dyslexic. I agree. You have thought about the problem they have just highlighted in the meeting, and you've got a solution, and you're trying to interrupt the meeting to inform your colleagues about the solutions, and then they find it, as mentioned earlier, that it was rude to interrupt. Actually, this is an important element. Actually, it's also telling your managers that you are dyslexic, because I have been in situations where somebody has mentioned, oh, how did this person reach that position? They can't spell. And this is a strong element, because I have heard it being said about some other colleagues or friends who have reached senior position, and then you're in the same position. You're trying to explain, you know, this is my myself. This is me. I'm dyslexic. Please accept it. Also, please accept the way I work, my work pattern. I may work very, very late, and I may send you a response late, and I have to be politically correct currently nowadays. I have to put an email, a quote below my email that I work differently. I work flexibly. I don't expect others who work with me to respond to my emails currently. However, this is myself, and I have this confidence now to really look at things differently, take my time to analyze them, and then when I've analyzed them and I'm happy about it, I would send the response. This is a really important aspect. In industry, what I found in industry, there is some, and I'm very pleased that we are talking about this in industry, there is a greater awareness of the of dyslexia and its the difficulties that people with dyslexia have, and also the opportunities. But there is more to be done. There has to be a greater awareness that dyslexia is a different way of thinking, and many people who have dyslexia have innovated and have succeeded. You know, the innovators of the century, many of them have been dyslexic. The architects, the engineers have a high percentage of dyslexic, and I don't have figures, but I did hear we are about 30 to 40% who are dyslexic in engineering. Hopefully somebody will be able to get some figures on or on this and that on this percentage, and hopefully we can support future generations who are dyslexic and non-dyslexic to deliver the best for the sector and for the development of the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Issa. Very useful insight into what's going on in the universities, because as we know, it's the next generation. They're our future. Got just a couple of minutes now to throw a couple of questions at you, if I may. I guess one of them is, so based on your experience with the students, do you feel they are better prepared in general for the world of engineering? Those who have special needs of all kinds, but you know, those who have dyslexia, do you feel that they are better at identifying and embracing, or is it, you know, compared to your experience, is it much better, slightly better?
It is much better currently, yeah, compared to where we were. The current path routes that we are offered in higher educations are much easier and embrace that the diversity of learners. There's an important element currently at London South Bank University, in particular in building services engineering. We cater for almost 90% of our students are part-timers who were in the trade sector first, and we are, or maybe in the industry as well at a senior manager, what we are doing is providing a path route for them to accredit or appraise their learning and give them a qualification. The learner actually may have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge. It is for the academic institution to try and bring that learner on that journey and to bring the best information, the best abilities, and drive it forward. The learners really know what they want nowadays. I think they are more aware of what they need to do compared to where we were before, 20, 30 years ago.
Great, thanks. Well, we've got very little time, but I'm going to end on this note because I think it rounds it off nicely. We've had a question in from one of your students who says that you helped him to realise his dyslexia and noticed that when they're working out problems, he did it differently to the rest. And so he can't thank you enough. So there is a testimonial to the fact that you've recognised it and that you're working with it. So grateful student. And
thank you.
They're the future. Well, and thank you, of course. Thank you for your time. I think you're popping back to help us with the where do we go now at the end.
Yes, thank you.
And so we'll see you in a minute. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now then, we have our panel slightly running behind time, but within parameters for an RAC event, I think. We have our panel looking at the employment situation and professional associations and bodies. So let's see whether the panelists will pop up on screen, and I'm not talking to myself. Now, always good to see other people appearing on screen. They're all there, good. So what we're going to do is we'll get each of them to introduce themselves, and if you'd like to tackle your first question, which is really, well, you know, who are you and how have you become involved practically with the whole field of dyslexia? Now, I'm aware that it appears very clear on my screen. I can go clockwise, but you won't know, so I should just have to cue you in. So Daniela, do you want to go first?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me today. So I'm Danielle Palacios. I'm the General Manager at BISA Academy, which is the Building and Engineering Services Association and the division that looks after the training and skills. And I thought I would actually talk more about the endpoint assessment that is actually happening in building services engineering and some of the reasonable adjustments and the increase that we've actually had from employers. And the employers are now requesting reasonable adjustments for the apprentices during their final exams, whereas previously it was mainly the training providers and the colleges. So I thought that was quite interesting. And the different types of adjustments that they're asking for is to have in-person tests rather than the online tests, where they can actually have a reader or a scribe to be able to read out the knowledge test, reading instructions for the practical tests, giving extra time, as it was mentioned, you know, actually earlier, and also having the verbal instructions on site. And it just really made me think, my husband and daughter are dyslexic as well. And all these reasonable adjustments that are being requested in an exam environment, are there also reasonable adjustments being adapted in the workplace for exactly the same apprentices? It just really got me thinking, which I think is a big debate that we could probably continue and have separately.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. Okay, let's go to Artie next. Welcome.
Thank you. Artie Dillon, work for the Royal Engineering with the Diversity and Inclusion team there. I'm also a dyslexic as well. It's been really good to hear all the different discussions, the layers of things that people have both been challenged with and also kind of learning about themselves. And I'm going through that process whilst I'm listening to everyone as well. So it's working for me on a few different levels. So I appreciate that. You asked a question about what we do, and I don't know if it comes into the other question. We work across a number of different protected characteristics, and dyslexia does come within disability, although a lot of people, probably including myself, would rarely call ourselves disabled. But we are doing kind of raising awareness of kind of some of the challenges that have gone on, that people have faced. Things from kind of, there's more people who leave more broadly with disabilities in their workplaces. then who don't have a disability. They don't necessarily have a job to go to. They're twice as likely to be bullied in work. So you kind of highlighting some of the things that are going on and then go, what do we do to turn that around? And I guess as the discussion goes on, we'll kind of talk about some of the practical bits and pieces that we're also supporting and kind of taking part in.
Thank you, Artie. Right, Alvin.
Hello, hi. Thanks again for the invite. By occupation, I run my business. I'm MGN Services. I'm an electrical electronics engineer. I've been in business primarily for 15, 17 years plus, but been in engineering for over 30 years with various companies in both public and private sector. I am a chartered engineer and also a member of the IET, whereby I have become involved with the neurodiversity team with regards to, as we've discussed this morning, all the different levels of engineers that exist out there, which, you know, rightly or wrongly, some are a bit more, you know, sort of forthcoming with things, and some don't feel that they can be are included in terms of some of the activities that we do within the IET. I myself would class myself as non-dyslexic, you know, in terms of not being diagnosed. Maybe I, you know, it makes me wonder though, obviously I'm definitely neurodiverse, but when you see some of these traits, it can be difficult to even class yourself as whether you are or you aren't, because the nuances, there are so many nuances anyway, that we all probably have tendencies towards this. But with regards to the IET involvement, there have been some, I've sort of done, or have been asked to do as part of the forum, to look at the process of how we sort of classify various engineers within the actual body itself, because there's chartered status, incorporate status, and engineer text. And it was interesting to find that the engineers who wanted to go for the higher status didn't feel comfortable in following the process because of the actual complexity of that process itself. And that obviously triggered a lot of things and got well, me and also the forum to actually look at, is our process actually hindering people from actually going for what they believe they should go for and are allowed to go for, you know. So that's my insight into, and my road into working with neurodiverse. And as has been explained by Jeanette and the others, you know, it's quite difficult because you now have to we're talking to a body that normally is we're aware of this, but then it tends to be the non-dyslexics who tend to be in the positions of power, if you want to term it that way, in order to convince. So that's my road in as a non-dyslexic, so to speak. So
okay, thank you. Yes, we'll come back to you in a bit. So Tracy, welcome.
Hi, my name's Tracy Richardson. I actually work for a private training company called EAS Mechanical Limited, do H&V, plumbing, electrical training and such like. My involvement with dyslexia actually came about when I was in the RAF many years ago, and part of my training to do the Cert Ed, we had to look at specialisms, and that was one of the areas because I'd had a student who was struggling and I helped support him in a different way. Instead of just the PowerPoints, it was going into the doing hands-on training and posing questions in a different way to help him. And it basically sort of like sparked my interest. And so I just wanted to know more. So I actually went on to Manchester Metropolitan, and I'd actually did the course in, learning difficulties for adults. So yeah, it is something I'm quite passionate with, and certainly at colleges and schools and things of that nature. I think, how do we best support learners as they go through the journey? And I think sometimes with some of the schools, we kind of have to rely from the college perspective on what sort of assessments they've had done at the schools. So touching on a subject that Andy sort of brought up earlier, you know, learning to read. I always remember on part of my training, we were taught that basically up to the age of 7, you're learning to read. From the age of 7 onwards, you're then reading to learn. If you haven't got the basic blocks initially, then you're going to quite often struggle and feel left behind. So if the schools don't sort of click onto this really early on, then there's a potential that when that poor, you know, learner then goes on to universities or colleges, they're perhaps not actually going to understand why they're different. Why are they slower? Why are they not picking up things like other people are picking up? Or, like you say, looking at it in different ways. And I think sometimes, as I say, making it more apparent and making it more out there that, you know, people with dyslexia do learn in a different way. It's not a barrier. And again, this is something colleges, when learners come to enroll, there's a box on there, have you got any learning difficulties? And a lot will mask it and no, nothing, because they think it is going to help or hinder them, should I say. Whereas it is actually the opposite. It is, we're trying to understand what we need to put in to support them. And I think that's where I think a lot of the problems with, you know, colleges sort of struggle. And it was interesting to hear how many of the people on the panel today have only discovered and been diagnosed quite late on in life. And I found that in the Air Force, when I started doing my my training, a number of colleagues I had come up to me asking me, oh, can you do a DAS test on me, please? You know, and things of that nature. Going on to sort of like looking at association supports, I'm part of this Chartered Institute of Plumbing and Heating Engineering. And as part of the election enrolment committees, something I've been basically sort of bringing up to them in meetings, that one of the engineering council requirements is that we have to submit CPD. Now, as many people will say, with dyslexia, putting forms in front of you, it can be a scary thing. So to then ask somebody to put CPD, but not only just put what CPD they've done, but also to enhance it with a reflection on how that's helped them. Most people with dyslexia just go, oh, it helped because it's part of my job, I needed to do it. And yeah, I think sometimes it's almost a barrier, and some I feel can get rather put off with that requirement to elaborate on what CPD they've done. It might scare some people out of being part of a trade association for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the prime areas of this panel is to talk around practical things that employers, trainers, and associations, I guess, can do to help. So does anybody want to start off by giving us some practical tips? Who wants to start off? Artie, do you want to start off?
Go on, Artie. Go on, Artie.
I've queued Artie in. You can come second then, Mel.
I'll go after. Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's partly so that I can listen better once I've spoken, because otherwise I'm kind of worrying about what I'm going to say.
No worries.
A bit of a dyslexic trait, so that's just a tip for people as well. You want to get it over and done with so you can take part differently. So a couple of things that we've done in our workplace, as well as kind of more broadly, I just thought we're trying to lead by example. So it's not just kind of say what's going on in the engineering industry, but also kind of how we work as an organisation. So one of the things we put in place, we developed, was something called a workplace adjustment passport. This came from something that we'd heard a while ago. I think it was on the TUC website. They called it a disability passport, and it literally, we adapted our own version with it. With colleagues who were, other colleagues who had different disabilities, who kind of identified themselves that way, and just looked at kind of what would be a system, so you didn't have to, if you had changing managers or you progressed in an organisation, that you didn't have to keep kind of coming out, and that you didn't have to say, what does, you know, within that form, it's like, what's a bad day look like, what's a good day look like, what are the measures that will support you being able to do your job at best, and that should be reviewed kind of annually. I live on a really busy road, so this always happens when I speak, whenever the 999 kind of passes by. So that's something that we've done very practically as an organisation, and I definitely suggest it's something that is worth doing elsewhere. We're one of the smallest organisations to have done something like that, so I think it can be done. happy to share what we've done in the process. The second one, which finished a few months ago, was each department has a D&I action plan. So they have objectives to try and reach to, so that we are all working across our internal processes as well as externally to sort of be more inclusive, both on protected characteristics, but just as broad as possible. And what I did with a team, the events team, was, and that was one of their objectives as well, was work with them collaboratively, because I always work better that way anyway, because I don't know much myself. I generally know people who know stuff, and that's kind of how it works best. That we sat and worked out what would be something that would better enable people with different disabilities to come into the organisation, and how could the events team be have the tools and kind of processes to do that. So we did just a small piece of work on kind of an events case study. So we did 3 disabilities, or learning differences if people wanted to name things differently. One was dyslexia, one was on bowel cancer, and one was on depression. And say with the dyslexia one, we looked at what would you do before someone came to an event, what would you do or offer at an event, and what do you do afterwards? And then we provided kind of more detailed information for all the events organisers. And then we did a little video of 2 minutes. So we circulated on World Disability Day in December, did a 2-minute video to our colleagues. And then we've got a process of, in 6 months' time, we're going to check in with the events team and to other colleagues of what are they doing and how did that work. So that's 2 kind of practical things. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just thought that might be useful to share.
Yeah.
Thank you. Melvin.
Okay. Well, no, very interested. No, that's very informative. Thank you. Within the IET, Institute of Engineering and Technology, in looking at the processes and the procedures, basically, as Tracy quite rightly put it, put forms in front of people and they cringe. There's a chill that goes down their spine. They break into sweats. It has such an emotional impact that they want to run from the process. But we were looking and we were discovering and finding out, well, basically, what, forms are a part of life. We have to gather information as in some form, and of course, in talking to the actual departments, their response primarily, because they were quite defensive about, in terms of what can be done, what could be changed and whatever, was to try and include some other categories on the forms initially, and in order to try and give space for someone to explain, are there any other needs that are required in order to help you to complete this process, complete this form. Now, it's something that is being adopted in the process, because it's a massive cultural change. It's a cultural change to sort of think, because it was almost as if it was all engineers were the same, or certainly all electrical engineers were the same. They could articulate themselves, they could communicate well, they should be able to. So it was looking at what was being asked, how was it to be presented, are there any other ways in which this could be sort of presented, and it was wondered whether it could be almost a video clip or a visual aspect to doing it, rather than completing a written, what could be termed a linear form, very verbose, etc. That is still in the process of being adopted, because, as I said, this was quite a cultural shift in the whole organization, and there are still aspects of it that are trying to be adopted and to be taken on board. Also, something else that's being looked at within our forum as such, and within the IET, is the actual details of the information to go for it. So the website. Now, the website, again, website development is quite a massive area, because it's information, it's processing of visual information usually, and it's probably known that in the way in which fonts and styles and colors are presented can also be quite a hindrance to gathering information and to following processes and to finding and seeking information. So the website aspect of things is also being looked at in terms of how is it being presented? What does it look? What does it look, by getting feedback from engineers who are, you know, sort of have learning difficulties, etc. Is it actually helping? Does it enhance the experience of being within this institute and trying to help? Because at the end of the day, you know, however that comes across and manifests itself, you want to be an institute or a body that's inclusive, that actually gathers all the talent that's out there. You know, there are many other different barriers that occur anyway, you know, whether it was race or class, etc. Now, you know, some people feel already awkward about some of those, let alone another barrier, which seems to sort of impact its way in that shape or form as well. So practically, I mean, when it comes down to it, we have to look at those forms and how they're structured and whether we can reduce it or improve it or include it. And equally, as I think it was Izar mentioned, the language used on it in terms of the political correctness of things. And likewise, the actual presentation style of the website, because when it comes down to some people, the website is your front door to your institute, you know, certainly in the virtual world. And if you can instantly, you know, get an impression of whether, you know, that could be the first thing that someone sees, and that can put them, that either wants them to go in further or actually turn around and go somewhere else. So they're the sort of things we've been doing and looking at the IET.
Okay, thanks. Now, sort of seeding over into that, it's about, I was thinking about the amount of words that exist in our industry. So Tracy's, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, you know, it's a very wordy world we live in engineering. You know, are there practical ways that we can help?
Well, this is it again. Certainly, I think the last 12 months has certainly proved its own sort of challenges with delivery of even lessons. And as Melvin touched on there, it's like you said, the way that we sort of do sort of like lessons and sort of just simply put in Google Classroom full of, oh, you need to read this, you need to do this, you need to fill this form out. Some learners, I could say, I do reviews and they're like, you know, we can't cope, that's not how we learn. And like you say, trying to sort of deliver different ways, whether it's video clips and things of that nature. But particularly in the industry, and something I know Paul sort of touched on for gas engineers, for instance, something that, you know, has come out through gas engineering because of the way that the instruction manuals come about. They're very, very wordy. Absolute huge sort of like bank of words that scares a lot of people, and it was due to the court case that the main sort of elements of the instructions were put in like a black border. And basically, I always tell people, if you read nothing else, make sure that parts that are in that black border are the parts you concentrate on.
Right.
Because that came again because of a court case where somebody was being tried, I think it could have been manslaughter or something like that. And basically, he turned around and said, I can't read. I struggle to read. So they realized that the instruction manuals that he was supposed to be following were very complex and wordy. So they did sort of realize that they had to do something about it, and they summarized a lot of the information and put it in a black box and made sure that, you know, if nothing else, make sure that happens. And like I say, I think it's getting that sort of information over to a lot of people coming into the industry is quite important, because they might not realize the significance of why is that box there, you know, what's the purpose of it. So I think little things of that nature can go a long way to help.
That's good. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
I've just realised I haven't put myself on mute to deal with a little issue, and I can come back. Danielle, sorry. So thanks, Tracy. Yeah, it's useful. Danielle, have you got some practical solutions from your experience?
I think, again, if I look at it more, particularly the apprentices, whether they're the installer, the craft person, refrigeration, or the service and maintenance, it's making people aware that there are reasonable adjustments that can actually be requested. And it might be that people need to really think out of the box as to what those reasonable adjustments need to be. As I said previously, and some of the providers have been extremely helpful. EAS I actually know as well, where we were even discussing last week about what reasonable adjustments can we put for apprentices that are coming for their endpoint assessment. But I think now by involving the employers, it's not now just to the education to be sorting out what those adjustments can actually be, particularly if you think of some of the apprentices that when they complete their apprenticeship, they might not have a reader, they might not have a scribe to able to help them actually on site. So how can they actually adapt? And this is where it's more about looking at behaviours of individuals and not being scared to actually say that they are actually dyslexic. And it could be that encouraging the help as well. And that awareness, I think, the more we talk about it and the more the employers and then the colleagues. One thing I did, note down as well is we put adjustments actually that our teams are talking about it all the time. So it just becomes a continuous topic so that anything we put together, whether it's the academy requirements, is also involving what if it's somebody who's dyslexic, what for somebody who actually has, dyscalculia or dyspraxia or other neurodiverse, conditions. I think really for myself, it is helping the employers that they can have the awareness themselves and not just relying on academia and the colleges and training providers.
I think one of the things that we need to do following this forum is to put all the links to resources in one place for everybody who's been on the call. That will be a starting point, I think. But I think I sort of get the impression that, that not everybody knows every possible resource. I mean, there's quite a lot of resources, but they are not necessarily all in one place. So we need to try and do that. What about, I've heard a lot of talk about technology and readers. Does anybody want to, are they reading pens? Can't remember exactly what the technology is. But anybody have anything to say about that?
There's several pieces of software that can be used on the voice recognition. I know that my daughter is using them for her A levels, but we've also got learners or even employees that are actually using them. And it's a lot better. Before, with those of you who probably recognise the initial Dragon software when it came out, and it just didn't recognise accents. Whereas now it really actually is improving. But you have to slow the pace of the voice. And that then obviously impacts the way that you thought process. I know working with a lot of dyslexic individuals, they sometimes think extremely quickly, and to have to slow down, it can actually even impact what's coming out. Don't know what others think about the software, the digital software, voice recognition.
Yeah, there is, like you say, quite a few barriers, even doing voice recognition on your phone. Having an accent, it can sort of certainly change the way that certain things get dictated. And like you say, in even in education, sort of, which is the part where I come in with the the engineering side. That's something that when the learners come to a particular place, if they've got any form of known sort of like dyslexia or anything of that nature, they can actually get funds that will help provide support, like the speaking, Dragon software, and even the pens. I used to have a pen that I used to use for meetings, because like you said, not only would it scribe on the special paper, which could then be turned into Word documents, it would also record the voice as well. So I could listen back and fill in gaps where I didn't quite jot things down. And it's a brilliant piece of software to be using. And like you said, again, developed for students with either learning difficulties or even people like myself, where just trying to take down minutes of a meeting where it bounces around so many times, and you think, well, I missed that little bit. You can go back to it, you can overlearn, you can start sort of like realizing, well, what else was in that sort of like tutorial that I've missed. So there are some really good pieces of equipment out there, and as you say, getting in touch with likes of the adult learning support centres at the colleges and things of that nature. And like I said, it's something like I say I do with our centre as well. But as I say, the British Dyslexia Association, and it's quite amusing as I was on the conference, I keep getting emails popping up from them, and that, you know, places like that and Patos, they're very good resources to actually find out what is available for people to actually, you know, go to. And as you said, it is that sort of there's a whole bank of sort of stuff there that people can, you know, find out and use, whether they think they've got dyslexia or they definitely have been diagnosed with dyslexia. It's something that will help everyone. So yeah, great stuff.
So, Artie, we were going to perhaps talk about examples of good and bad practice. Did you have anything else that you were going to add on that front?
I guess just one thing which kind of links to technology as well, which was just about having time. All the technologies exist, and I could probably have 2 pieces of software that helps me do documents or be in meetings, but I'll still need potentially more time to write things. And I think a number of people who might struggle with the written word or kind of presentations, having time to, like, you know, having time to prepare for questions, having time to write. I think most people I know haven't actually found technologies which make up for that. So one of the things that people rarely talk about in kind of reasonable adjustments is giving additional time for projects, reprioritizing things, and that doesn't just work for people who've got dyslexia, but also kind of wider groups of people, because there's so much on. And I think the APM, Association of Project Managers, did some research around why projects are late. And often we're not putting in buffering time around kind of turnover of staff, new projects, innovations, or like in this situation, like a pandemic. And it's kind of, if we're not putting those time in for really complex situations, we're also not putting those things in for when things are hopefully back to a more sensible, normal, and healthy for everyone. So I think time is one of those things that is kind of often not talked about, but I think that and workload is a huge one, so people can take part fairly and equitably.
I think when you think about everyday engineering life, this whole concept of thinking around how much time people require, you know, certainly anybody that's associated with the construction side, time seems to be something that is squeezed forever. And in fact, you know, perhaps the opposite is what we should be thinking about to make sure that everybody's included. Melvin, do you want to add something? I do. So I can anticipate.
I do. Marvelous. And just to add to Artie's point about time, which is obviously very, very crucial and is always critical in our business, in the electrical or engineering side of things, you know, everything is squeezed. It's also the sort of the tolerance that sort of others, you know, have and should include, just to be, and it's an overused word, but it is totally pertinent, to be aware of our differences, of the differences of the workforce per se, you know, because whether it's some people who are more practical, some people who are more academic, some people who are thinkers, some people who are doers, let alone the nuances of how they actually think or how they actually do things, or, you know, there is, and it's a tough discussion to have in an engineering environment about being tolerant and just to understand differences, let alone just being aware of them is a great start. Don't get me wrong, and I agree, but there's the actual implementation and execution of actually being tolerant about someone's or even some team's way of working, because people often aren't working themselves in the construction site, they're working in a team or a group, and they all have to interact and relate and to get that task or that job completed on time, ideally. So there's all these interrelationships that exist, you know, which adds another dimension to the whole aspect of all of this. So there is also, with the time, there is a tolerance aspect, I feel, that gets a bit of a, you know, it's always there. However, it's it's almost like the elephant in the room type thing, you know, in so much that, you know, if we were even better, we don't have to be fantastic communicators. We just need to be, you know, good, competent communicators. You know, and not, you know, I by no means are a fantastic communicator, but I try to take my time and be clear about what it is I want and maybe what it is I don't want, I suppose.
Yeah, I think one of the overwhelming themes is listening, isn't it? Listening to people and listening to what the concerns are. Now, we are unbelievably near the end of our time, but cleverly, I'm letting you put in a little plug right at the end, because my final question is, what do you think professional bodies and trade associations can do to help? I'll go to Artie first, so that she doesn't have to worry about the anxiety side. And then I'll go to Danielle, and then Melvin, and then Tracy. That's the way I'm going to do it, because that's the way you are on my screen. So, Artie, what can we do to help? You do to help.
As trade organisations and kind of professional engineering institutions is kind of work together, share the information we've got, share the reasonable adjustments, maybe do it in some coordinated way. And I know Stephen was really keen on doing that, who's one of the people behind today's event. And if we can do that in a coordinated and consistent way, I think that'll be helpful. And it might be just mapping out, what do we do every 3 to 6 months? What specific things do we share? So it's done kind of, sometimes you get loads of things through, whether you're dyslexic or not. I think people are quite overwhelmed with life at the moment. And it's like, okay, this one thing we could all look at is X, or the one thing we could look at in the next 3 months is X, and kind of build that through. So there's that kind of side of things, coordinating and sharing and campaigning like that. There's also, I think your following question was going to be something that I kind of wrote some notes about, and I kind of think it links in, which was something we were talking about in terms of like statistics and monitoring. And it's not the biggest thing in the world, but it does definitely help to kind of identify, if we can monitor the numbers of people coming in, people who stay, people who progress, and why they exit, we'll get a sense of what's going on within our own organisations. And we do encourage that for everyone, because you do get to see patterns, and then you can kind of look at a pattern, or kind of where a team might need more support, or you know, or a manager might need kind of more intervention around what they're doing. And I think they'd be really positive to do that. And the thing that people have been talking about, educational, professional learning, kind of interactive versions, and not just pushing everyone to be online and read things. We did something called Team Workshop Series, which we did with some engineering employers, that I'll put a link in the chat in a bit. And it's just 4 pop-up workshops that you don't have to be a D&I specialist, and you can do it with like whether you've got a team just coming together or you've been around for a while, things around ways of working. So we can say, Artie prefers having questions in advance, or so-and-so, you know, is great on the hoof, or likes to read documents in advance. So we kind of talk out loud about our preferred ways of learning, and some of those are linked to our protected characteristics, and some of them are just things that we start to become self-aware of, or we can realise we get really stressed if this doesn't happen. And I think there's some kind of opportunities around those sort of training things that maybe other professional bodies have also got, and then we could look at coordination of sharing that out, and kind of sharing what the benefit and the change has been for that for a team or an organisation by using them.
Great, thanks. Danielle?
I actually agree with Artie. I think it is about the associations working together and standardising, sharing best practice, putting actually toolkits together, question banks, reasonable adjustment banks. You know, every month I'm learning new ways to actually add reasonable adjustments, and it's not just the standard ones of giving it extra time and being able to actually read out. There are some really things that can think out of the box. And I think actually, after listening to Jeanette as well, the other thing is really helping employers embed reasonable adjustments, but not to just be about education. And I think there's a lot, not just awareness. I know that Melvin was talking about awareness. It's a bit more than that. It's the educating employers to adapt, to put in place reasonable adjustments for all of their employees, and helping them with the diagnosis. I'm really always surprised of the amount of individuals, they know they're dyslexic, but there's still no formal diagnosis. And until they have that formal diagnosis, legally, there are certain things they can't actually access. So I think it really is helping the employers with the reasonable adjustments and sharing best practice with associations and others.
Thank you. Melvin?
No, fair point. No, in following on from Danielle's point as well about that, I think the sharing information and coordinated information, spot on. I think that is the main thing, to be honest. A safe environment, safe in quotes, with regards to judgmental aspects of this, because that is the biggest fear, is that it seems to be in the workplace, certainly, that's just something else to be judged upon. And it's all the judgmentals that go behind, which is why it's not spoken. It's almost the unspoken thing. And also to be, having said that, we do also need it to be discussed by both, I'll say it, sort of dyslexics and non-dyslexic, or, we're all neurodiverse. We are all neurodiverse. So it has to almost become a conversation or an environment that can have that conversation, that is just a conversation. Because again, when it comes down to it, people, we are all different. People don't generally like to talk about differences in the main. And that's not to say everybody's just homogenized and we're all the same and we're trying to strive for that. But people just want to be heard and to be included, and for everything to sort of exist or coexist, if you want to say it in that way, and just to feel it's a safe environment.
Which is why we are running slightly over, because I'm trying to let everybody be heard.
Sorry.
No, it's not you. Don't worry. I'm trying that through the whole morning to let everybody be heard and to get get what they want to say out. And if my organisers are having kittens in the background, then so be it. Tracy, so to finish off, what would you like to say?
I think, like you said, stripping things back sometimes and not overcomplicating certain elements, even like I said, forms, websites, all that side, just to make it nice and plain so everybody is there clear to see, and it's not one of those over academia sort of styled environment, because like you say, if it's open for everybody, then you'll encourage more people to come in. And as Rosina put in one of the comments, team working and peer support, very, very important. So having that sort of visual to say, we're here for you. What more can you ask for? Thank you.
Yeah, I am aware that we're always hustling everybody on, but thank you very much for your time and for giving us your insight. And we will now see you fade away into the ether while we introduce back some of our leading speakers today to just finish off, which is what we're going to do is just a couple of minutes. Bear with us, all of those of you who said you've got another appointment at 12:30. We'll be just 5 or 10 more minutes. Welcome to the stage one of the creative brains behind this conference, Steve Gill, founder of Dyslexia in an Engineering Day, amongst other things. And welcome back to Jeanette. So in these few minutes, where did Issa go? So Issa, you were in on the call and then you disappeared. And I don't know whether Andy was coming back, but he might in a minute. There he is, on cue, there he is. So now I've got a panel of 4 people and I've got effectively 10 minutes to try and get your closing thoughts. We better go over to Steve for his thoughts first. But before I do, on the Q&A at the moment, there's several people, some people from outside of the industry, one person calling in from Malaysia, just to say thanks for putting on the forum, because the lady from Malaysia said we probably couldn't do this in our country. So props to everybody who's been on this call. I think it's been a very interesting conference so far. What do you think, Steve?
I think it's been an amazing conference. Yes, I think all the speakers have excelled as I hoped they would and expected them to. So there's no pressure on them, but they all met my expectations and more. And it's been fascinating to hear the conversation. I mean, one of the key aims, and I think many have said it, is collaboration here. As I've grown in my awareness of the issues around inclusivity and dyslexia and neurodiversity and everything else, I'm becoming aware of all the pockets of great work that are being done. There's lots of people out there doing, and associations doing lots of little bits. It's a journey. They're all on a journey, but they would. I think if we could share that knowledge around, and as we are today, we have speakers from many different associations, many different backgrounds, and to make it more open, I think that will help the journey in a long way. Just a couple of things I'd like to pick up. I mean, there was so many things I'd like to pick up on, but there isn't time, and I'm really keen to hear the other speakers. One of the things is numbers for me, and we've heard what the consensus is of what dyslexia is in the general public, but my experience in engineering, and I think Paul alluded to it, I think it's much higher within engineering. And I've been unable to find any research into this at all. So I think if we had numbers, that would be a great eye-opener to everybody and would help with all we're trying to achieve. And the other, and just one more thing I'd pick on quickly is, we talked about awareness, and I think Janet's talked about disclosure and making things public. It is partly the judgmental side. We as humans, we worry about being judged all the time, but it's in the workplace, it's as much about the reaction. If you go to your manager, they're busy people, they have a lot on their plate, and their reaction is not necessarily going to be judgmental. It's something else they have to deal with. If you can raise awareness and education about how they deal with it, they will manage it then in an organized, mannerly way. So discovering somebody is dyslexic, they will have all the tools available to them, will know where to go. It will just be, okay, I can deal with that. So
collaboration is a key. Collaboration is a key element, isn't it? I think that's come out today. Also, I don't know what the rest of you folk think. Confidence is a very important one, and how we collectively give people with dyslexia confidence.
Can I come in here?
Yeah, and I stopped because I thought you were going to come in, and then you paused politely. So carry on.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I think one of the aspects with dyslexia, it's not accepting it, as well as not seeking support. Sometimes it is hidden, and many people don't understand it, and don't understand the difficulties of not sharing it and not being open and accepting support. The other important aspect is the processes. I think if we were to enable or to share these processes, how do you seek help from the industry, from the sector, in a focused place? There is a place where you could maybe do a quick test. We have online calculators, we have online checks. Why can't we have this, where a person can do a quick check to find out where they are, whether they are dyslexic or not, and then find out where and how they get help and support. And then the last thing I really would like to leave on is the really general positiveness. Thinking this is not a difficulty. This is associated with creativity, associated with being able to innovate differently. And if we can put some leaders in the sector, flag those leaders who are dyslexic and highlight them, that those are the leaders in the sector who have achieved in the last decades or last century, and they have come out and been open about this, and yet they have achieved. I'm really, really proud of all of my students, dyslexic and non-dyslexic, on their achievements. The one who have been dyslexic have really gone through a lot of hard work in order to achieve. And the hard work is what I see in all of them, that going the extra step. And they always also like to help others. Yeah. This is some attribute I found with dyslexic. Once they get it, they really like to share it with others and help others. And I really have the pleasure of saying that to all my students. Welcome.
Well, I think you're all proving that now. You're sharing on this forum. I'm thinking aloud that we need to have a website for dyslexia and engineering. Maybe Steve's already working on that behind the scenes, but if not, that's a thought. But I'm also thinking, I'm sitting here looking at two of you from LSBU. You need to be lobbying for research into dyslexia and engineering. Yeah, because I know you can get funding very easily, you folk, you know. But plug together and let's get some dyslexia funding. So see if we can get a number on it for a start. That's just my challenge. Andy, how have you felt it's all gone today?
I've really enjoyed it, actually. I think it's very, very interesting to see. And there was so much, particularly at the beginning, to emphasize with others. I realized that I thought, listened to what was being said and thought, oh yeah, that's me, yeah, that's right. And I think it's important that. So I want to come at a slightly different view on the training side, which is one thing that, for instance, Andrew mentioned earlier is the ability that dyslexics tend to have to see everything and get it all. They've seen all the various routes, they've seen it, and actually what they're frustrated by is the time they're going to have to explain it to others. So I think potentially that within the world of dyslexics, perhaps we should get our act together to try and work out how to teach each other to explain to others, because the problem is at one level you're too slow, to put it bluntly. And when we're trying to explain sort of the solutions to an engineering issue in particular, that has been sort of, it all happens, but we're poor at communicating. But actually the problem is you're too slow at learning from what we've already done. So we have a task to do, which I would like to work with Stephen on, actually, is how to put together something that would help teach sort of dyslexics in the workplace how to go about explaining what they're trying to do in a way that others understand, because the problems are not ours, they're others in many ways. That's being arrogant, and that's
come in
nice
to say
to
something.
get to that position.
Andrew's popped in to say something. Hello. You're on mute though. You'll have to start again.
Click the wrong one. Click the wrong one. There you go. Sorry, Andy. I just wanted to follow up on that because this is something really tiny and really small, but something that I've learned, because I am really poor at communicating sometimes, because I just want to get onto the next thing and the next thing, is that I've found that I complain to everybody else that doesn't communicate properly. They're poor at communicating to me, and then I get frustrated. And I've learned, and the reason I teach myself and to improve is because there's a small story, and I want to share it with everyone because it's really tiny and small. But for me, it's so important about how to describe communications. And I say to people, imagine you're sitting at an airport with your family in the departure gate, and this is a holiday you've saved up for all year, and you and your family are all sitting there ready to go, and the flight is in 2 hours, and you're sitting there having an ice cream or reading a book or whatever else you're doing, and suddenly the board changes and it says your flight's been delayed by 5 hours. That's it, period. And everybody moans and groans, and the poor people at the desk then get bombarded with people running over and thumping and bashing them. And then I say, imagine exactly the same story, the same scenario. You and your family are sitting there ready to go away, ready to go on holiday, and the board changing it says, your flight's been delayed by 5 hours because of the late arrival of the inbound aircraft from Paris, which had a technical fault and was stuck on the runway and had to return. It doesn't change the end result. The end result is your flight's still been delayed by 5 hours. But you know, as a human being, you feel like you've been given the reason, you've been empowered enough that people respect you enough to tell you the reason why. And I think that for me is just you know, the importance of communications. And that's when I often see people get frustrated with me and think, hang on, and end up telling myself that story to then spend longer communicating with them. But it is finding the time, and I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for popping up. Yes, now I was coming to you, Jeanette, but now here you are.
Okay, thank you. I know that we're very, very short on time, and there's something that I really am very keen to say to people, is that the process for accessing support in education is very different from accessing support in the workplace. And whilst you might need a diagnostic assessment to actually access extra time and exams, that is not a prerequisite for having a workplace needs assessment. And so often for people, they see that as a barrier. And of course, for employers, we really do need individuals to get access to tailored, reasonable adjustments as soon as possible for all the well-being of the individual, but also to help them be a productive, happy member of staff. And so having an accurate process of how to access support within the workplace is really important, because reasonable adjustments is definitely not a one-size-fits-all, because we're talking about people who are each of them unique. So, you know, to say, oh, you need voice-to-text software, text-to-speech software, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
You need a person-centered approach based on the individual, their workplace, their tasks, their experience. And because there are so many different solutions, and they're a part of a jigsaw that comes together to help that individual. So really a workplace needs assessment is essential. And also people think that self-advocacy, well, tell us what you want. People don't know what they want because they don't know what they're struggling with. So I really just wanted to kind of split the education and the workplace, and you know, and say that actually there's great work going on. We're on a journey, but and I wish you all the very best with it. And Steve and I have worked together just recently, yeah, that's it really. I've stopped.
Thank
I'll
you.
stop.
I've got a question back for you on in response to that, and that is, if I was an engineer in the workplace and I hadn't got to this point of actually raising it with my employer, what do I do? Do I go to HR or my boss or whatever and say, what's the key phrase? I say, can we make reasonable adjustment, I guess?
It's interesting. Okay, that first conversation is usually the barrier.
Yeah.
And so in an ideal world, you would speak to your line manager, or you'd speak to HR, or if you've got an equality, diversity and inclusion department, you'd go there. But of course, people don't feel confident quite often. And this is a sales pitch. Dyslexia Champions come in. I actually developed that program based on the work that I was doing at Imperial College, because we had a really good, accurate, you know, overview process with booking forms and everything, so that people who didn't have to speak to anybody necessarily, but it was part of the formal process of support. So ideally, some organisations, and I mean, trade unions, NHS, across the board, I can't think of all the organisations, now have accredited dyslexia champions who are the impartial, knowledgeable signposters who can have a chat with somebody over a cuppa, and they can have some information shared with them about dyslexia and the common co-occurring conditions, and then they can go away with more information and make an informed decision about whether to seek support or not, because they should know what the process of support is within that organisation. So they're almost the kind of gatekeeper, as it were, but of course they need to signpost to whatever the internal process of support is. And what we're finding is that's the next step. People need to do that. And I'm actually working with 6 different police forces at the moment on a level 4 programme, and they're developing the information infrastructure, because it's all about changing the culture within the organisation. So, and Steve, I don't know if you would like to say a few words. That would be really helpful.
Well, I can announce publicly that I have been through. I am an accredited dyslexia champion, having been on Jeanette's course, and it was fantastic. And it is all about signposting, and what I was mentioning earlier about how perhaps your line manager will react. Unless they can find somebody to signpost them in the right way, they won't know. So having the workplace signposter is really important. And yes, it is a plug for Janet's course, but I highly recommend it. We
will put link. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to put Steve and I will put heads together and put a big set of links to everything that we've talked about, including your course. So we are in minus time now. So what I'm going to do is repeat my trick of asking you to say one sentence for the key takeaway for people today. And I will start with, so I will go Issa, Andy, Jeanette, and then we'll end with Steve. So Issa, what's the one, now see if you can keep to one sentence, not as easy as it sounds, it seems. You're on mute, so we're not going to get any sentence.
Okay. So as I will just reiterate the last word of the last speaker, the first step or the first conversation is the hardest. Embrace that and take actions.
Brilliant. Andy? Also on mute. There we go. Well done.
I'm not anymore. I think my main concern is the move away from practical subjects, and we need to concentrate on building respect for practical subjects and the complexity they embody.
Thank you.
At academic level.
Jeanette?
Thank you. I'd like to echo what a lot of people here have said, that actually when you're struggling, it's not comfortable, and if that is prolonged, it can impact on your mental health, and people haven't necessarily been linking the two things together. We've gone through a period of change, which is difficult for everyone, but more difficult for dyslexic neurodivergent individuals. What I would say, although you may not feel confident to do so, there are people out there to help you. Please don't struggle in silence.
Thank you. And Steve, wrap it all up in one sentence.
Wrap it all up. Okay. Well, this is Neurodiversity Celebration Week. I think we should be celebrating the diversity of us all, our neurodiversity, and that's what it's all about. Dyslexia, we've said we're all different, and I think we should embrace that and celebrate it. And in that spirit, I would like to really, I know it's a bit of a wrap up, but hosting this event today by RAC and H&V News is part of that. You're helping the industry and helping the collectivity of it all. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for pushing the plug back to us. From our point of view, we're doing it. With RAC and H&V, we tend to put our webinars on with a sponsor because that helps pay for everything. We haven't got one this time because we thought we wanted to get going on it. It's the right thing to do. We're welcome to any sponsor next time when we do the next one. But what I wanted to say was a real vote of thanks to everybody who's been on this call today. Certainly the panelists and speakers, you've really put your thoughts and yourselves on the line, but also to all of you who've been listening in, because it's about it being a collaborative experience. And what I'd encourage you to do, I know we said it's about confidence, it's about sharing. We'll put the link to the recording of this up online. But so it may be something that you want to share with your colleagues, just point them in the direction of the stories that we're writing, or indeed to the recording. That might be the first thing to help understanding. If we've done one small thing to raise understanding, then we've succeeded. So thank you very much for all of you listening in. Thank you for your time, all of you panelists. And with that, enjoy your lunches. Goodbye.